Animal Man changed my life. I know that's a crazy thing to say, but I just can't stop thinking about this fucking comic. It has invaded so many corners of my life. When I watch Severance, Squid Game, BoJack Horseman, it's almost like I can hear Grant Morrison's voice. Why do you enjoy stories built on suffering? I didn't realize until this moment I did not know how Grant Morrison sounds. If you haven't read these 26 issues, congrats, you were just like me a couple weeks ago. Hi, I'm Comic. I read comics as a newcomer and give my honest thoughts. This video is by far the most amount of material I've ever put in a video, so let's get into it and see if it's really worth all that hype. So coming into this, I assumed Grant Morrison created Animal Man, but he actually dates back to Strange Adventures 180 all the way back in 1965. He's shown up here and there throughout the years, but he's a Z-tier hero. He's basically a nobody. I did some basic research and there's next to no reason to read any of his prior appearances since he has like no agency in those stories. So why adapt this seemingly random character? Well, there's two reasons. First, we'll see that animal rights and environmentalism have huge emphasis in this run. And Buddy Baker, Animal Man's persona, has the ability to absorb any animal's powers in the vicinity, so it connects very well thematically. The second is his lack of notoriety. He has no baggage, important continuity, not even a passionate fan base. As a result, Morrison retains unparalleled creative control. Even if they wanted to destroy his character, it's not like the higher-ups at DC would go rabid at the loss of IP. And this lends the story instant charm. Buddy opens the series canonically fallen on hard times. He's not an inspiration in the least. And I'll get more into the meta later on, but just know the seeds are planted. Animal Man is a series that failed to get good sales, and Buddy is a hero that failed to achieve notoriety. Initially, Grant Morrison was asked to make a 4-issue miniseries before fan interest exploded the scope. So let's start with those 4 issues because they form a pretty tight package. Animal Man #1 opens with Buddy Baker mostly retired from superheroics. He lives in a boring suburb and struggles financially, but he wants to be a celebrity superhero like those sexy ones in the Justice League. Creatively, the flip side of this is Buddy has just like a nice, normal wife and kids, which is just so refreshing to see in a comic. Gosh, I really hope nothing bad happens to them. And then have some joke about like foreshadowing here. Like foreshadowing, you know, is like, I don't know, you know the joke. So Buddy, who wants to take any job he possibly can, is hired to conduct an investigation of this company conducting these animal experiments. They claim it's all in the effort of getting an AIDS vaccine. We see this grotesque amount of monkeys fused together and the book says go. I want to quickly gush about this writing. I've seen some threads compare Grant Morrison to Christopher Nolan, and I can see why. There's such a refreshing level of intentionality behind their pen. Like, take the first page. Our masked villain is lamenting on how monkeys should have stayed in the trees to prevent humans from evolving. And turn the page, Buddy is right in a tree. The parallel is, if Buddy doesn't take this call, if he just stayed in that tree, that minuscule decision would wipe away the next 25 issues as a whole. There's also a ton of wordplay like shooting blanks, free as a bird. You just don't skip over dialogue in the story. It's too good. But I think the Morrison-Nolan comparison is in some ways a disservice to Morrison. Their personal and emotional style that they write Buddy's wife Ellen and his kids is something I haven't seen from Nolan yet, and it's a huge reason why these early issues feel so alive. Hey Xbox, what is foreshadowing? There are 2 purposes for the second issue. The first is to introduce the theme of human folly. Hunters disrupt the ecosystem. Scientists torture innocent primates. This comic firmly places humans as an invasive species, which also sets up our villain, who we'll meet formally next issue, as an eco-terrorist, which for 1988 is really cool. The second purpose is to have some really cool fights. So there aren't a ton of action sequences in this run, but when they do appear, they always hit. Buddy's powers are just perfectly suited to make creative fights from. He'll absorb a mantis to get super strength, or bacteria to multiply. It's great because his powers are so wide-ranging, but at the same time not confusing. Buddy's confrontations aren't easy nor straightforward. There really is no level 1 goon. The grittiness is on full display when he loses his arm before copying an earthworm to regenerate his limbs. And this lack of power isn't just for our enjoyment. Buddy himself is super self-conscious, and it's only exacerbated when he meets Superman. It's only for a couple pages, but it's really the only time in the run that we run into a popular character, and it has a lot of real weight to it as a result. Animal Man is not a guy who can save the world. He can barely fight street-level threats, but it's animal cruelty and research that's on full display in issue 3. So we learn our mystery villain has been trying to free his orangutan friend from that abuse. We learn also that the AIDS vaccine stuff is pretty much a total scam. The research is torturous and inconsequential. And finally, our villain is unmasked as the white god of Kilimanjaro? Kilimanjaro is the highest mountain in Africa, and it was a little surprising and honestly upsetting that they made the white god of Kilimanjaro white. Aha, we have both fallen for Grant Morrison's 4D chess trick. Bwana Beast, as he's called, is a hilariously old colonialist character also from the 60s. And in resurrecting Bwana Beast and Animal Man from this era, it's a really cool way to holistically pay homage to the Silver Age. It's like flirting versus harassment. You can't pretend all the stories in the 60s were fun hunky-dory. It's also the first critique of comics as a medium, which we'll see a lot more of, so keep that in the back of your head. Ellen also gets the entire B-plot to herself, which is huge for developing her character. And when Bwana's orangutan friend dies, it's pretty heartbreaking, and the book starts asking you some pretty difficult questions. Is violence justified to stop animal cruelty? Are humans inherently exploitative? Can Animal Man even stop such systemic problems? All of this comes to a head in issue 4 when Buddy realizes the people that hired him are the evil scientists. He's forced to make a ton of tough choices, and this conflict is fantastic. It's also greatly enhanced by Morrison's attention to detail. Like when Buddy absorbs the powers of a bird, you can see it in the background. And Buddy being able to defeat Bwana Beast by copying his powers is really cool and creative. But don't worry, the evil scientists also get a taste of karma. This was definitely supposed to be the end of the miniseries, and while the story is gonna get a lot bolder, I do really like the smaller scope of this arc. It's probably the most consistently exciting set of issues in the run, and I totally get why there was fan demand for more. Those fans had no idea what they were in store for when Morrison wrote Animal Man number 5, the Coyote Gospel. I'm dedicating a whole chapter to this because it might be one of my favorite single issues of all time. A cartoon coyote named Crafty, clearly a parody of Wile E. Coyote, escapes his Looney Tunes style universe into our DC one. If you haven't seen Looney Tunes, it's a kid's show where all the plots revolve around insane violence, like animals will get blown up, crushed, shot, mutilated, but they always return fine for the next episode. But in this universe, what we think of as wacky cartoon hijinks turns into the fucking tragedy of Sisyphus. Crafty is continuously, repeatedly, and brutally murdered by this hunter who is convinced that he's the devil. This is when Morrison truly reveals their ambitions, when they finally play their hand. Fictional characters like Crafty or Bugs Bunny are subject to endless levels of suffering for the audience's enjoyment. So if stories need suffering to matter, what does that say about us? This is the question that's been haunting me as I watch other media. But at the time of reading this, you as the reader are like, what the fuck? So you keep reading and you see that Crafty eventually wants desperately to die as this endless violence becomes unbearable. So he intentionally sacrifices himself right as Buddy is about to find him in this Christ-like crucifixion scene. But as we pan out to close the issue, we see that the blood is white. Why is it white? Then from the heavens, a hand holding a paintbrush comes down and fills it red. I, like Buddy, am pretty confused what I just witnessed. And when I read it the first time, I actually wrote mostly negative things about this issue. I thought fundamentally the metacognition themes of this issue clash with the animal rights one of issues 1 through 4. Like, sure, there were hints like Bwana Beast from earlier, but the whole point of this issue is to be meta. It's a complete change in tone. But I was wrong, and let me explain why. The question that encircles this issue is, who is responsible for the suffering of fictional characters? And Animal Man the series treats fictional characters like humans treat animals. powerless beings trapped inside of systems they can never comprehend. Hey Xbox, what is foreshadowing? When Buddy and Morrison get epiphanies to become vegetarian, it's a statement that humanity consumes animals the same way as readers consume fictional characters. Casually, repeatedly, and with no question to the systems behind it. And as someone who consumes meat, I feel kind of weird right now. Morrison clearly wants to evangelize vegetarianism. He pretty much says as much in the preface to the omnibus. And it's clear the point of an issue like this is to make you conscious of it. Once suffering is understood, ignoring it becomes impossible. To ignore the conversation between Morrison, Buddy, and the reader, who is me, would be making a shell of an analysis. So if you'll allow me to be a little vulnerable for a second, I don't think I'm ready to become a vegetarian forever. I would just be lying to you if I said I was. So what am I gonna do? Well, I'll be intentional about recognizing this moral horror, which is what Morrison wants me to do. I'll also try to cut down on beef and buy meat more sustainably in general. But is it selfish that I couldn't become a vegan or even a vegetarian? Maybe. And while Morrison asks the reader to donate to PETA at the end of the book, I'm going to donate the entire lifetime earnings of comic to the ASPCA, which is, fun fact, where I got my cat that is my channel icon. I'll also put their information in the description in case you want to. We're going to put a quick pin in this animal rights stuff. I have a lot more to say and disagree with Morrison on the vegetarianism, but we have to wait until the end of the book to talk about it, so we'll come back later. But this has deeply touched me and is maybe one of my favorite single issues that I've ever read. Issue number 6 is pretty boring. It's a generally inoffensive standard superhero romp. It does show that Buddy sticks out from your other superfolk. You know, he comes to the realization that he doesn't really belong in like a standard action adventure story. But in my opinion, to dedicate an entire issue to that realization is unnecessary. The amount of science fiction talk is also bordering on terrible. Best case, it's inoffensive. Worst case, it really sticks out from the quality of these future issues. The next 4 issues I'm going to group into a chapter called Hints of Meta. Now that this is expanded into a full-on run, we have to do a little bit of setup. While these range from fun to very important later, Buddy just doesn't have as much agency as I would like him to. Issue 7 is a perfect example of this when Buddy encounters a strange figure called the Red Mask. The Red Mask comes from a strange limbo reality of forgotten or discarded fictional concepts. It's another hint that our fabric of reality isn't as tight as we think. It's unclear who he's referencing. Some people say it's the Red Hood from Batman, some people saying it's this other guy from like 1939. But he's very suicidal given that he's really old and in pain, and Animal Man is like, no, don't do it, but then he does it anyway. Thankfully, issue 8 is a lot more entrenched in the main plot when Mirror Master attacks Buddy. He's sent by the evil scientist from earlier to stop Buddy's animal rights work. He's another D-list hero from The Flash in 1959, but here he's interestingly enough portrayed a little bit more sympathetically. I think this issue does a great job emulating that Silver Age charm. I specifically love this part when the text is flipped in the mirror dimension, and even Ellen gets in on the action. It's only 25 pages, so for that length, I'm okay. But while issue 9 is only 1 page longer, it's a lot slower. Buddy's powers get scrambled, and then Martian Manhunter comes. Congrats on the Eisner Award! But the point of this is to ingratiate you into Buddy's family life, so when shit goes down, you'll be invested. For now, though, you'll have to wait. And please wait a little bit longer because we get a bonus issue on Secret Origins. The point of this issue is to re-explain his 60s origin, but it directly contradicts things that we've already been told. So now you're like, what the fuck? But then you meet these guys, and they seem to be aware of the inconsistency. Now it's gone beyond hints of meta. You're being actively teased about it. And if that was a tease, Fox on the Run is cards on the table. Kaboom! Here's where we meet James Highwater, who has been mysteriously guided to go to Arkham Asylum and visit this guy called the Psycho Pirate. Just remember him for later. The Arkham inmates are clearly residually affected by Crisis on Infinite Earths. And if you, like me, have never read that, it was the seminal event storyline from the 80s when DC completely changed their continuity. And if you want me to read that, drop me a comment. We see this with Mad Hatter, who is insane saying we're all just words on a page written by some cheap hack. Good one, Grant. But as Highwater meets with the psycho pirate, who is basically totally insane by this point, he gives him a message, which turns out to be an old Animal Man comic. It's from the 60s and it features none other than our alien friends from before. Going back to Buddy, he runs into Vixen, who is fleeing some unknown threat. Then they break into his house. But then Buddy gets fucking disintegrated before we flip the page and see the aliens who claim they're in charge now. These last few issues are a lot to throw at the reader, and I'll be honest, I was kind of lost in this bit. But it still works because the emotional core is still Buddy and his family. Even as things get crazy metafictional, Morrison always returns to the idea that Buddy fundamentally is a loving father and husband. Issues 11, 12, and 13 are a really nice arc where Buddy and Vixen go to Africa. How do they get to Africa? Well, the same way we all do. Aliens trying desperately to piece together your continuity. This arc is very similar to our first, with themes like colonialism, environmentalism, corporate exploitation. And it may not sound like it from those themes, but I really love how small scale this plot is. Morrison is deconstructing the white savior trope in comics, and I think it's really cool. I'm so impressed that the story can multitask from creating a strong villain like Muhammad Ali to deal with aliens struggling with the continuity and develop Vixen into a great side character just for kicks. There's also some more thematic points on fictional pain, like the aliens are like, it doesn't matter if you killed this random guy, he was just a background character. The storylines expertly converge and Muhammad Ali confronts the aliens who erase his character, and I was grinning the whole way through reading this. And for issue 13, we get the return of Buana Beast. Let's fucking go. But Grant Morrison says, I'm not done comic, and just throws in this expert critique on apartheid South Africa like it's fucking nothing. This might sound a bit disjointed as I explain, but it's so impressive how Grant Morrison can continuously integrate these plot points into this already complicated ass story. The story is Buana is looking for a successor to his position, kind of like the Dalai Lama. The next Buana turns out to be this guy, fighting apartheid, which is so fitting that they took this borderline racist character from the 60s and turned him into an anti-colonialist. And I need to mention it even though it's not that significant, but when they killed this evil NP guy, it's so satisfying. A lesser writer would have stretched this whole thing out. So when I finished the first omnibus, I did something I've never done on the channel. I just kept reading. So while in practice this is a double video, I like to do the ratings separately of like what you would actually buy. A few quick things I wanted to say that I couldn't fit into the other chapters. First, I think the art is pretty good. I would say the best art is in the second omnibus, but I really enjoy how animals are drawn. They're just drawn so tenderly. I feel like other animals in comics are a very uncanny valley, so this is just a treat. If you are enjoying this vid, I would really appreciate it if you subscribed and let me know what other comics I should or shouldn't do. I try to reply to every single one. So as you all know, there's one more thing we gotta do. We gotta rate this collection. If this was just Coyote Gospel and 300 blank pages, I would give it a 5. But these first 13 issues are so refreshing and challenge the reader in such cool and novel ways. Animal Man by Grant Morrison, Volume 1 is gonna get an oh so sweet 10 out of 10. While both omnibuses are 13 issues each, the second one, in my opinion, has a lot less happen, which is why I'm going to call these first 4 issues of the second volume the Fucking Around chapter.
I don't ever slow up, no I don't take shit, I got no love for the fakeness.
But just because we're not advancing the plot doesn't mean it's not interesting. We open to a strange figure warning Buddy's daughter Maxine that something is in danger, that he misses her. He disappears before we can see any more, but already my interest is piqued. But the spookiness doesn't stop there. Buddy's son Cliff is playing with a Ouija board and it spells out his name with the numbers 9 and 27. Ellen, who is totally freaked out, asks Buddy to investigate, but not before passing a calendar open to September. The figure disappears before they can get a good look, but not before writing one last 9 and 27 on their door. Issue 15 has Buddy team up with dolphins to stop dolphin murder. I find it funny how much of an absolute tone shift this issue is. Again, the Fucking Around chapter. This is just Morrison saying don't overfish, don't destroy the environment, don't kill dolphins, etc. The only thing I think you could say that advances the plot is its radical radicalizing Buddy towards eco-terrorism. Issue 16 is pretty by the book. I like that we get to see Ellen being cute, but this conflict is not super compelling. As the reader, you have this sense of impending doom. You have that unidentified figure from earlier. You have this Mike Pence looking guy stalking them. You have Mirror Master, who already attacked Buddy once before. So having none of that progress here makes this self-contained story feel kind of pointless. Put this in a lesser run and I would rave about it, but here it might be one of my least favorite issues in the run. Animal Man number 17 is called Consequences, and I think it might be one of the most underrated issues. Buddy participates in a direct action raid on an animal testing facility. They free these tortured monkeys, but after, Buddy torches the place in retaliation. However, this kills 3 firefighters in the aftermath. The consequences don't stop here though. Buddy's family is increasingly hostile towards his vegetarianism, and you can feel him being ostracized for his views. His agent drops him, and it's a great come-to-earth moment for his character. He quits the Justice League, donates money to the firemen, and severs all ties with the activists. The B-plot is also stellar, with our mysterious man Mr. Lennox fighting Mirror Master. He wants the floor plans to the Baker house, but also to silence Mirror Master as a witness. He succeeds in the former, but fails in the latter. Something I've omitted has been James Highwater. He's been on this mysterious mission to find Animal Man, but we don't really know why or who's guiding him. He finally finds him in this issue, but we see that his legs are deteriorating into sketches, begging for help. And now we begin Animal Man's final arc. Highwater tells Buddy everything that he's witnessed with Arkham Asylum and the Psycho Pirate. Again, put a pin in that, he's important later. He explains that he's been guided here by a mysterious force and it's telling them to go to Arizona. Buddy, who connects the aliens with Highwater, agrees. In Arizona, they find peyote, which is a hallucinogen they reluctantly take. What follows is my favorite artistic sequence of the run, with this giant trip where this sentient fox reveals to them that a second crisis is coming. Buddy learns that we're all connected, but if I can levy a complaint of these last 8 issues, it would be that they're kinda confusing. Like, I love these issues and I loved when I pieced them together afterwards, but my ego is not big enough for me to claim that I understood this on the first try. This is not something you half read, you really have to lock in. If I'm being honest, I think Morrison over-explains Animal Man's powers and occasionally uses like overly complex words to seem smarter. And I think it does, to an extent, hurt the pacing of these last few issues. But as we close out the issue, Buddy and Highwater trip balls, and Ellen opens the door to a smiling Mr. Lennox. Issue 19 is the emotional breaking point in the entire series. We open to a strange figure at a desk, struggling to determine what should happen next. Still hallucinating, Buddy meets 60s Buddy, who explains his origin, that 4-issue miniseries from the 60s. The past Animal Man explains that they are tortured for entertainment, their lives not even their own. He concludes that he's been erased from the continuity, and Buddy demands to know who and why this could have happened, secretly anxious the same could be in store for him. And then a voice whispers, "Turn around." And for a moment, Buddy sees you. What a mic drop moment. I read this on the train and I was just like bewildered for probably 3 straight minutes. Contrast that with like Deadpool, someone whose fourth wall humor can seem forced. In Animal Man, it feels violating. Buddy starts frantically going through his life, noticing plot holes, coming to the realization that he exists for our entertainment. I think seeing Buddy like this makes him feel more alive than any character in fiction. I almost want to talk to him in that moment. I almost want to say I'm sorry. But the fox returns and says this secret, the knowledge of the nature of his entire reality, comes at a great cost. Buddy sobers up and rushes home, only to see that corporate forces have retaliated against his activism. Ellen, Maxine, and Cliff are murdered. This scene is horrifying on so many levels, but chiefly among them are the fact that we've been caring about them for so many issues. Additionally, connecting their fate with Buddy learning he's a comic book character makes the reader feel uniquely culpable in this. But what's done is done, and Buddy completely breaks psychologically. The next couple issues explore that grief. He questions not only God, but the author for his suffering. I think Morrison does this very intentionally. It feels like a critique on that trope of you kill the main character's family and he gets all buff and wants to take revenge. Instead of a training montage, Buddy loses all sense of purpose and is very clearly ready to kill himself at the end of the issue. But right before he does, he gets a call. It's Mirror Master, and he says he can lead him to his family's killer. I do love that Mirror Master goes from villain to hero. It's a trope that I'm very fond of. But I think the issue is a little bit more cliche than Morrison intended. Buddy puts on a new suit and they hunt down the killers one by one. I don't mind it because it's just like fun to have a simpler arc, especially because we get that stellar action which has been largely absent the last 3 issues. However, I don't really think this subversion works that seamlessly. It really feels like they needed to have something to keep the reader engaged as they go into the boldest 5 issues I've ever read. Time in a Bottle completes our time loop setup way back in issue 14. Accompanied by some great art, Buddy, desperate to see his family, lies to this guy to use his faulty time machine. Only he realizes he can't actually change the past. As someone who does not like time travel stories, this futile and harsh tone is super novel. The vibe is this torturous melancholy, and it's really compelling. Time travel is almost universally shown as cool, but in Animal Man, Buddy relives these memories, but with the joy completely stripped from them. His agency, forever lost, is example 1000 of Grant Morrison throwing around bold and innovative ideas like they're nothing. The dread of seeing Buddy relive these moments with his family without being able to feel is genuinely heartbreaking, given the reader had a role in this. Although I'm getting a little bit ahead of myself. Through the same Ouija board, Buddy signals 9/27, the date his family dies, although he knows that no one will heed his call. We close on our aliens visiting high water, saying the story is coming to an end. Don't you just love it when you record an entire segment, but then you realize the mic has been turned off the entire time, so now you have to do the whole thing again, and now it's late, and Our next issue, Crisis, unsurprisingly leans a lot on the Crisis event, which again, I have not read. And if you remember the guy freaking out in Arkham Asylum with that Animal Man comic from earlier, that's the Psycho Pirate, and this is our first real introduction to him. He's been given the inside scoop from the aliens, and as a result has knowledge of all of the characters that were written off from the continuity after Crisis. Meanwhile, Buddy is being consoled by these 2 immortals, don't ask, but it's on the meaning of life and it's honestly very beautiful. But back at Arkham, the danger grows and the apocalypse nears, and some of the lost continuity starts falling out of the panel margins. I think compared to something like the Coyote Gospel, these last 4 issues do kinda ditch the animal rights themes in favor of the metacognition one. It is just like a huge increase in scope very quickly, and it can be a bit jarring. Like, those initial animal rights stories feel like a completely different series at this point. Having these characters that are dead in a world that never existed, exploring the implication of erasing canon is really cool. And it might be because I haven't read Crisis, but it's just an angle that I'm not that compelled by. But thankfully in the next issue, Animal Man finally shows up with his renewed sense of purpose. I would just like to say that these last 8 issues in particular are very dense, and I've cut a lot for time, so I want to say, like, even though if you watch this video, I implore you to read it because it is really that special. And I hope you like information because this issue is a big fat protein shake. So Psycho Pirate is the only one to remember the pre-Crisis continuity, so the apocalypse has him bringing in all of these different characters into the current continuity. High Water by this point puts it together that they're all comic book characters merely existing for entertainment. Shout out to this segment where Animal Man crushes this alternate version of Superman in his panel. It's very cool. And as the only one who understands space-time, High Water dons the mask to become the new Psycho Pirate and assumes his position in Arkham Asylum. And Animal Man, meanwhile, demands the aliens take him to his creator. He needs to know why he exists and who really killed his family. Animal Man's penultimate issue is fittingly weird as fuck. Buddy wanders through comic book purgatory with this monkey who supposedly has the answer. I particularly like how Mr. Freeze is here because in 1990 post-Crisis and pre-Batman the Animated Series, he really was in this in-between. But at least we know he got out. After years of carrying this monkey, Buddy puts together that his very last script is where he must go. He knocks on a door and a voice replies, "I've been expecting you." And it's Grant fucking Morrison. Welcome to our last issue, Deus Ex Machina. What a fantastic idea this all is. At this point, everything has been revealed. Buddy just reads his own comic. Morrison lays it all out. His existence is only for entertainment. Buddy retorts with anger and despair. His family needed to die for entertainment? Morrison, with no remorse, says it gives narratives meaning. He admits that he exploits Buddy's fictional suffering just like humans exploit animals. And while his world isn't real, the cruelty and power are still the same. Morrison midway does their special thanks to while conjuring up villains for Buddy to fight in a hilarious sequence. And in one final act of mercy, Morrison resurrects Buddy's family and says a new writer will be there soon. Buddy cries tears of joy, but Morrison is unsatisfied with the ending. They tell a story of their childhood, a real one of them and a fox, the very same one that's been showing up throughout. But as Morrison walks away, Foxy is still there in our world. Stories matter, and while fiction isn't real, obviously, the emotional impact it has, the actions they represent, the sentiments they immortalize, that's all as real as anything. The ending of Animal Man didn't make me feel clever, it made me feel guilty. As someone who does enjoy fucked up stories from time to time, it made me second guess a lot of the times when I love fictitious suffering. When I criticize the boys for not having a good comic medium critique, this is the counterpoint. I feel profoundly haunted by Animal Man, and yet I feel that the second book groups cruelty a little too broadly. In issue 23, Buddy is consoled to choose life. Victims gain nothing by your suffering. His family would want him to live on. The comic repeats multiple times that the last enemy to be defeated is death. This optimistic nihilism does not land for me. I think Morrison paints a clear picture. Humans at their core are cruel creatures. They are cruel to animals. They are cruel to their characters. And if you read this comic, you are cruel. And I am too, I guess. You bought the comic where the kids die, and you like that part. If readers are cruel and authors are cruel, who is not? On the one hand, this is extremely bold. I commend this critique on darker and edgier stories. The idea that fiction should not reflect life's tragedies is not really an opinion I've heard in my entire life. And part of me agrees. I mean, if we as a civilization prefer Long Halloween, a story filled with profound suffering, over 60 Spider-Man with themes of hope, optimism, and joy, is that not a bad look for who we are as people? That we like this shit? I think there's two angles I can take with this. One is, it's just a fucking story. It's not real, it's not happening in front of our eyes. But this is the genius of Animal Man. That dissonance is the same one I placate when I order a steak. It's immaterial where that steak came from. That slaughterhouse might as well be a fictional character to me. And while I like the idea of choosing positivity more, like those stories we had in the Silver Age, it brings me to my second angle. Grant Morrison is not innocent in this. When they wrote A Serious House on Serious Earth, which is a banger of a comic that I covered, they are participating in the same tropes that they critique. I don't know if you're allowed to criticize suffering-driven comics and then write some of the most disturbing comic content there is. It gives "we're all trying to find the guy who did this." I went back and forth to try and determine if Morrison is trying to absolve themselves of their sin or confess it. And in this moment, I lean confession. Because I don't think Animal Man is anti-tragic story. In fact, I would say it self-actualizes the contrary. I think Animal Man is anti-blind consumption, which I'm glad Morrison is not trying to wash their hands from this, but on the other hand, it totally undermines these themes of animal rights. Morrison needs to hurt these characters. If they can't create meaningful stories without suffering, why should I sustain my life without harming animals? You see how that kind of breaks down? And I could see how someone would say that bringing Buddy's family back at the last second undermines their point, but I actually think it completes it. The resurrection of Buddy's family is almost as horrifying as their death. With this change, Morrison reinforces the dependency and exploitation of the character. Buddy didn't earn anything. His character was granted it by Grant. And maybe that's the point. Maybe Grant Morrison just 4D chess owned me. Or maybe the boldest and most ambitious piece of media I have consumed in the last few years bit off a bit more than it could chew. Animal Man is not condemning tragic stories. It's condemning the ease that we consume these stories, fictional or real, without examining our relationship to it. This is a hard video to end. I definitely recommend the run if that's not obvious already. If you have read this run, I am begging you for your thoughts in the comments. I'll try to reply to every single one. If you're new, welcome. If you like this video, I think you would really enjoy my most recent Wonder Woman or Daredevil one, which I'll link in the description. And it's about that time to rate Volume 2, which I think I'm gonna give an 8 out of 10. We'll call the series as a whole a 9, but I'll keep the rankings separate. This video is getting way too long and it's way too late, so if you watched to this point, I sincerely thank you, and I hope you have a good one. Peace.